back to What the Fertility. We only have a couple more episodes left of season 2, which is crazy. But we are so excited to have news personality Katie Krause Mork on with us today. She is an Emmy winner seen on Entertainment Tonight and ExtraTV, and she is a founder and CEO of Novalynn Fertility. Their goal is to provide at-home fertility health testing kits for an affordable cost. We can't wait for you to share your personal journey that led to your sweet baby girl and tell us all about Novalynn Fertility. So welcome, Katie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And also, I just want to say, I love your guys' podcast and what you've done and how open you've been about your own personal journeys. And I think it was helpful for me and I'm sure for so many others. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We're so excited that you're on. And like I said, I know you have now a business all around fertility as well, which is so cool that started just kind of, I guess, through your own fertility journey. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. It's crazy. And I guess I'll give you a little bit of the backstory, but I think, so yes, now I'm a new mom. My baby is 8 weeks old. She turned 8 weeks yesterday and it was
Congrats.
an IVF. Thank you. It was an IVF pregnancy. So I'm so grateful to science.
Yeah, right.
But I guess I'll start from the beginning. Like Jason and I, we met later in life. He was 39 and I was 34. And I guess a few months into it, we had the talk, do you want children? But at the time, I never thought that it would ever be a struggle, right? You just think, oh my gosh, I finally met my person. I want to enjoy this relationship. And then I think around 35 or so, we had the talk I'm going to freeze my eggs. Do you want to be a part of this and make embryos with me? We
Now, were
did
you
that.
guys engaged at this point, or were you just still dating?
So I think we were engaged. Let's see. We got engaged exactly a year after. I think we started having to talk about freezing the eggs and doing that whole thing before we got engaged. And then a couple weeks after we got engaged was when we did our first retrieval.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
And thank God for Jason and for having a partner who is so supportive and on board with that, because I know it can cause some people to flee or run or be like, whoa, this girl's crazy. So he was super on board. And then when we went in, which was not ideal. And of course, it's not something that you think could happen to I was like, oh, we're gonna make embryos and then we'll plan our wedding and then maybe we'll need them and maybe we won't. And you just don't think that it's gonna happen to you, I guess, which is maybe naive.
Yeah. I feel like
And
most people feel that way. It's just going to be so easy. It's just this fairy tale thing. I think we all just feel like it's going to be until
yeah,
it's not.
exactly. Until it's not.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that first retrieval, I think we got six. We made, 6 eggs were retrieved. 3 of them made it to blast, and then 3 turned to embryos. But then when you do the PGT testing, only 1 came back normal. So still at that point, I was hopeful. I didn't know much about, the process. I was like, oh, great, we have 1 embryo. That's
We're
plenty.
good.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we're good. And so then we went forward with our wedding and all this stuff. We did take a small honeymoon before our wedding because we thought maybe we'll want to get pregnant right away, and let's kind of do things a little bit backwards for the sake of time. And I ended up, so this is what's wild, is I ended up actually getting pregnant the week of our wedding.
Oh my goodness.
And I was so shocked. Because during our egg retrieval process, they did tell me that one of my tubes was blocked. So the chance of me getting pregnant, I still could get pregnant and all this stuff, but I had an ectopic pregnancy, in 2011.
Oh my goodness. I'm
Um,
so sorry.
and I mean, it happens. And even ectopic pregnancies, I feel like there's not enough conversations about that.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much to it. It's so scary. They're
It's
so dangerous. Yeah.
They're very life-threatening. You can die if it's not, taken care of medically. And thank God for doctors for seeing that, because I was rushed to the hospital. That's a whole other story. But anyways, got pregnant. again, like I was in this little fairy tale land, like, oh my gosh, like we got pregnant the week of our wedding. This is so exciting. We scheduled our first ultrasound appointment. And when we went in around, I guess it was in early December of 2022, or 2021. I'm like, what are the years?
Oh, it
Yeah,
all
right.
like blends together.
Yeah, exactly. There was no heartbeat.
Oh no, I'm so
And
sorry.
still, like, I had hope. She was like, well, let's come back in like a week and see if it started. Like, you're at that phase where, maybe it just hasn't started yet.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. And so we went back after Christmas that year, and I would have been around like, I guess over 8 weeks, almost 9 weeks, and then still no heartbeat. And I just remember like sobbing. And that was my first experience with like, we got really excited and we thought this was it. And then to lose the baby, it's just like heartbreaking. And then she asked me, do you want to do the pills or do you want to schedule a DNC? And in that moment too, it's like you don't know anything,
Especially,
right?
yeah, and especially like as going through it the first time, and if there hasn't really been anyone in your like community or group of friends that has gone through it prior, like you don't really know which one to choose or
News,
you know
yeah.
nothing about it. Yeah.
And thank God, and I guess not thank God, but one of my friends had gone through it and told me that she did the pills, and she was like, I didn't do the DNC, I did the pills. But I guess she didn't really explain to me like what happened. And so I do feel like after I took the pills, like I kind of felt like very isolated on my own. And it was honestly the worst day of my entire life. Like I don't think people explain, and I guess this, do you add like trigger warning here?
Oh yeah, I know, right? Trigger warnings, all the trigger
Okay.
warnings.
um it was just like the amount of blood, and then I was really sick, like I was throwing up, like it was just like horrible. It's like you're crying, you're in so much pain because like the cramps that it causes, and then you see like the amount of blood coming out of you, and then you're throwing up on top of that. It was just the worst day of my entire life.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I
It
feel
was,
like doctors, and I mean, we're so grateful for obviously all physicians and like all of this, but I feel like maybe because it's unfortunately so common, like it is 1 in 4 women, that they just don't
Mhm.
explain it well enough of like what's going to happen and really break down. Like I know for me, and I did the pills as well. I had no idea that my body is truly going into labor. Like you're
Yeah,
passing that
in
baby.
it exactly.
I had no
That's
idea.
I know, me neither. And
Um,
I think you're absolutely right, and I think our healthcare system is like very flawed out here because things haven't been updated in so long. It's like the same practices have been going on for years and years and years, even when you're doing all these tests, right? Like I remember doing the HSG test, which is essentially like they blow up a balloon. Have you done an HS? Yeah. It's freaking horrible. And like no one explained that to me. I ended up seizuring on the table
oh my gosh.
because I didn't know. Like I was just like so shocked, I think. And
Yeah.
I just feel like all these practices are a little bit out of date, and they just expect the women to just take it and be brave, and they're like, oh, it's mild like discomfort, and I'm like, none of this is mild discomfort, none of this is all traumatic.
100%. Yes.
you know
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm
um,
so sorry for your loss. That's absolutely heartbreaking.
thank you. And it was heartbreaking, and now it's, I think, the way that I try to look at it, because in the moment it's like the darkest day of your life, and now I feel like it's part of our journey. And that's the only way that you can look at it, I guess, without, you know, being super depressed all the time, is like
Yeah.
try and find the silver linings, right?
Um,
So I think that was like our first bout with like, okay, this happened, and like now we have to like move forward, and maybe now we should actually consider doing another retrieval,
mhm.
because we only have the one embryo. Um, so we fast forward a couple months, went to go do another retrieval. And then when we went in, and at this point too, like I had been taking like vitamin D and CoQ10 and all these supplements that they tell you to take to like up your levels. And like my AMH had gone up. So I was like, oh,
Working.
okay, great. Like maybe now like my body is like realizing it's supposed to do something. And then we met with this new fertility doctor, and he was like, oh yeah, like your AMH for this level, like I am expecting to get this many eggs, yada, yada, yada. So we went in for them to like look to see if I was ready to start the next round of shots and, stims and all of that.
Mhm.
And they only saw, I guess, like 4. So he was like, okay, I think maybe let's wait for the next cycle. And I
Oh,
was like,
no, that's literally
oh,
the worst feeling. Oh my
it
goodness.
is. 'Cause then, yeah, I just remember being in the parking lot and just like crying, like to Jason, and then having to go to work after that. And it's like,
Another thing. That's so
like,
hard.
yeah, it's like, you got to put a smile on, and especially like in my industry, like you're just expected to be on all the time. So, I think, yeah, this was like around spring, and we were like, again, like, okay, you know what? This is taking a big toll on us. Like we had the miscarriage, and then now we have like this bad news. And I know for so many others, it's like, even for you, like the amount of like loss and stuff, but for us at that point, like it was still all new to us. So it just was taking a toll on like,
Well, and you're newlyweds, right?
and
Like,
we were newlyweds. So we were like, we need to enjoy our marriage.
oh,
So we decided to go and like take a real honeymoon this time.
yeah,
And we're like, let's just go, it was on our bucket list to go to Italy. And we were like, when we come back, we don't know if we'll ever be able to do this again, because we'll probably implant our baby and do this other round and all this stuff. It's going to be like a whole other like
yeah.
situation. So we went to Italy, and then we came back, and then my work was like, can you go to London for like basically 72 hours? And I was like, okay. So it's like trip to Europe, come back, go back to
Back.
Europe.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then I remember when we were coming back, we were supposed to start the stims. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. Um, Came back from London, went to go start our sim. So this time they saw like a few more. I think they saw like around like 8, which was a great number for us. Um, Started the shots, and then realized, okay, took a pregnancy test, was pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't know why, but I think after you have um loss, you obsess over, or at least I did, like I bought like 5,000 pregnancy tests to see if the line was like getting darker, right? Like
We all
it's
do it. Yep.
like I was like lining them up, I'm writing the dates on them. Like you just have so much trauma. So I think I bought, like, I'm not joking you, I think that time I think I went through like 30 pregnancy tests to be like, is this real? Like, is this happening?
Mhm.
And then I noticed that the line like wasn't really getting as dark as it had the first time. So I went to like this clinic, and I was like, could you do a test here? And they're like, okay, so it doesn't show that you're pregnant, but our test is like 50, like your HCG has to be at 50. And I was like, okay. And they're like, why don't you go to Quest and they'll draw your blood, and then we can see if it's doubling. And I was like, okay. So we went, and then went back, 48 hours later, drew it again. And at that point, it's like you're waiting for these blood results. You're just like still continuing to take at-home pregnancy tests, and I'm seeing the line, um and then all of a sudden I got my period, or I was bleeding out or something. It was like a really heavy period. So it was like another,
Oh,
finally the doctor called. They're like, oh, sorry, it did, unfortunately, like your numbers didn't double. And I wanted to be like, yeah, I know.
I'm bleeding.
I'm
Yeah.
bleeding.
So,
Um, and so it was another pregnancy loss, but they called this one like a chemical
mhm.
pregnancy, which I guess is also very common, but another term that I wasn't even familiar with.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry.
and so we were just like so upset again, but we had it like scheduled to start the stims. So we're like, okay, I guess, I'm bleeding. Like, do we need to wait a cycle? Can we start now? They're like, no, we could start now. And I was like, okay. So we were on day 2 of shots, and then I wasn't feeling good, and I took a test and I had COVID.
Oh my
And
gosh,
I
Katie,
was like,
no.
are you kidding me? It was just, and it's funny because the doctor said this to me. He was like, unfortunately, in this world of fertility, it's bad news until it's good news.
Wow.
And that was the most real thing that anybody could say to me is like, it's just bad news until it's good news. Cause you feel like you're just getting hit by a car like over and over and over again, like straight to your gut, basically, is what it feels like just gut punch after gut punch. Um, and so we had to stop the stims, reorder medicine, which is like so
I was
expensive.
gonna say, yeah, which is so crazy expensive in itself. And then you only
Mhm.
got to do it for what? You said 2 days?
Yeah, so we did two
All
days, but
that. Oh
then you have to order medicine. But unfortunately, a lot of the medicine, it's not like 2 days of medicine, right?
my.
So we had to order like a whole new like Gonal F pen, and you have to order more like Cetratut, like all of these. Even talking about all these medications, I'm like, oh my god. So
It's
we
all
had
traumatizing. It
it's
is.
all it's all traumatizing. Um, and so we waited another cycle, went back in. They saw, I think it was like 7 or 8. So we're like, okay, yeah, we're comfortable moving forward. Um, we went through the retrieval the next cycle, ended up getting 7 eggs. Again, only 3 turned into embryos, and then again, only 1 normal.
Wow.
And one of them was low mosaic. So I know that there's like hope with low mosaic and all of that. So now we have at that point, then we were like, okay, we feel good. Like we have 3 embryos, like we want to transfer. So fast forward, we met with a doctor and they're like, do you want to do acupuncture? Do you want to do an ERA? And so we're like, okay, we need to research all this stuff. And also I don't know about you, but I felt like it was never explained to me what a transfer entails.
Yeah, no. I mean, I just knew that they just basically put the embryo up you. I didn't really know what they did, how they did it.
And the fact that you have to start taking medications like weeks beforehand and the progesterone oil,
Yep.
like all of that. It's like you're basically doing a whole other round of like egg retrieval, but you have to do the progesterone shots for me, I think we stopped around 11 or 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So it was like preparing my body again for just like the amount of shots that we do when you're doing fertility treatments is wild, right?
Insane. Literally
It's
insane.
it's just insane. It's like hundreds and hundreds of shots.
Well, it's like a full-time job. I think that's like the biggest thing now, like obviously going through it and now hearing all like people's stories just on the show. I like that's like my biggest thing is when I talk to people, I'm like, just prepare yourself. Like this is like a full-time, not only just mentally, but like
Uh-huh.
physically, you were adding in like another full-time job to
Yeah, and your body is going through all these changes because you're essentially just injecting, hormones into your body constantly.
Yeah.
Um, so we decided to not do the ERA. And I know some people like have had a lot of success, but we said, I want my body to feel as much like me as possible. Because if you're doing a whole round without actually implanting, and then you do go to implant, I thought, what if that medication messes with this? I don't know. In my mind, it just felt like there wasn't enough research around it. And we were also just anxious to like implant this first embryo.
Oh,
Um, and so we ended up doing it. And I know you're supposed to wait. And the doctor was like, okay, wait to, people are going to be anxious with a pregnancy test, but, do your best to wait for 10 days and then you'll come back and we'll draw your blood. And I was like, there's no possible way, lady, that I can wait.
yeah.
So
No.
again, I did the whole like, I'm going to buy a million pregnancy tests. And I think around like day 5, I started testing. I saw the faintest line and I was like, okay, but now I know it could be a chemical pregnancy. I know it could not take, like, I don't want to get my hopes up. So I then tested again the next day, all the way up until like the 10-day. And I kept seeing like, okay, the line's getting a little bit darker. The line's getting a little bit darker. But I think when you've had loss again, it's still like you have this PTSD, like you just don't believe it's real.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
you just think, okay, when's the other shoe gonna drop?
mhm.
So
Well,
we
because that's
go
all
in,
you know. Like all you
that's
know
all you know
news
is
and
loss.
negative
Mhm.
things surrounding pregnancy. Yeah.
So I just was like, okay, I can't, and I think that's like the hardest thing about loss is that it takes away your ability to feel joy during pregnancy, because you just think it's not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
And so we went in and the doctor was like, okay, congratulations, you're pregnant, you need to come back in 2 days and we'll test your blood again and make sure the levels are doubling, and you have to go in basically like every other day for like for that whole first week to make sure that the numbers are going up. So like you said, yes, it is like a full-time job. And I was going, I think at like the earliest appointment, like 7 a.m. and then like going to work after. And they kept doubling. And I was on like Dr. Google constantly, which I don't recommend, being like, is this enough? Is it not enough? Like, what is,
It's like the
trying to,
constant comparison.
yeah. And like going on Reddit threads, like the amount of rabbit holes I went through on Reddit to be like, what does this, level of HCG mean? And like, okay, it's not exactly doubling, but it's going up. And then freaking out about like, why didn't it double enough? Or like, why isn't it as high as other people? Like you
Oh,
drive yourself, yeah, you're just driving yourself um nuts basically.
because you want it so bad. That's like what it obviously stems from. Like you want something so desperately that you're going to do like everything in your power to try and get it. And then
Mhm.
so you're like, okay, like just going and like you said, like just going down a spiral and literally just like looking at everything possible to make sure like that doesn't happen. And hopefully you get what you want. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I-
a whirlwind.
it's and so and at this point too, it's like you're doing the progesterone oil shots every morning at the same time. So then those, I think we had to do ours every morning at 8 a.m. And I remember too being so on top of it, of doing it at the exact same time, that when we were going in for our appointments, we would bring the progesterone oil, and like my husband would literally inject me like in the parking lot, because it's like we would have our appointments at like 7:45, and then I'd be like, okay, they take your blood really quickly and then you leave. And then I'm like, all right, now we got to do the progesterone oil outside in the parking lot at 8 a.m. Like the things you do, right? And
Never in a
look
million years did you think you would be dropping your pants in a parking lot.
in a
Probably.
parking lot, exactly.
Yeah.
And looking back at it now, I'm like, wow, the things we did, and it's just wild. And I also am like so grateful that this first transfer worked, because I also, I'm in all these Facebook groups and people are always asking, did anyone's first transfer work? And they're looking for hope, just the same way that I was looking for hope. And so I always try to respond to be like, this isn't everybody's story. And I know some people that have transferred multiple embryos and it hasn't worked.
Mhm.
I even know for your story, right?
So yeah, well, we actually my first transfer worked, but my first rounds of IVF didn't. Uh,
Didn't work.
yeah.
Okay.
So we just did like the egg retrievals, but we all of our testing just kept coming back abnormal. But Cat's transfer didn't work.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I know it's not everyone's journey is just so different. And I'm so grateful that like our first transfer did work. But still, I don't think I ever enjoyed the pregnancy really at all, because I was so stressed out that something was wrong.
Yeah.
And so I was just, even up to like, we get to like the first trimester scan, then we get to the 20-week scan. And the doctors kept saying like, no, everything's good. She's growing normally. Everything's good. But I still was like, are you sure? And like so protective over this pregnancy, because I just kept feeling like it doesn't feel real to me. And then we bought a Doppler, which they say not to do, because I needed to make sure I could like hear her heartbeat all the time. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, I just was like, I want to make sure that like nothing bad happens, because I had read so many stories and like you hear things in the news all the time. And I was just so anxious the entire time. All that to say, like, she is here. Our labors was a whole other story. It was
Oh my
33
God.
hours of labor turned into a C-section. So I was like, nothing,
Oh my
nothing
God.
is easy, right? Like
No, of
just
course not.
it
No.
just none of it could be easy. So it was that, but all through that, and like towards the end of the pregnancy, I was like, if I could help people, and because people would ask me like, oh my gosh, how did you go through all of that? Because I was always open about this. And I was like, I wish that I had frozen my eggs when I was 25. And I hate that fertility is so much on the woman. Because I also think like male factor is like a big part of it. But for me as a woman, I felt like I wish I had frozen my eggs, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
10 years before I did, because I do think it potentially could have saved us a lot of the stress and a lot of the letdown of like, oh, you only got one embryo, which at first we were excited about. But then when you do another round and you're like, wait, we only got one more normal embryo, and you hear other people's stories of transfers not working. And at the end of the day, it becomes a little bit of a numbers game, unfortunately. Um, I was like, I wish I had just like known more about my body. Like, I wish I had understood like what even AMH was, right? And the fact that when my AMH went up, it was like a false going up because I'd been taking so much vitamin D. And like that all messed with like my numbers. Like, I just wish I had been more educated. And so that's why we decided to start Novalynn, was just kind of to like help educate people and like offer these tests. Cause I think until you go see a fertility doctor, you don't even know that you should be looking at your AMH
And
or
even
looking
that,
at
like,
your
yeah,
FSH.
exactly. And
You have no idea.
usually OBs don't tell you to even go to the fertility clinic until that first year. And in that, after a year of trying, they're still not even, at least in my opinion, or like my experience, they
Mhm.
didn't test anything in that year of trying.
Right.
You don't get
And
anything tested until you're then moved on to the
exactly. And even when you're in the fertility clinic, I feel like they do these tests, but you don't know even then what they're testing for, right? Like, you just
fertility.
are like,
Yeah.
are my numbers okay? And I remember too, like the first time when we went in and we realized my AMH was low, she still didn't explain to me what that was.
Mhm.
She just said I wouldn't wait. I would freeze your eggs now. Like, it was like bad news.
Yeah.
And I was like, I asked, and like, thank God, my dad works in the health space, and he always says like, request your medical records. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway from him through all this, and I'm so grateful for, and that I wish everyone knew. So your medical records are your medical records. And when you go to a doctor, you should always ask for copies of your medical records. And I think that's why people are always scared to like even switch doctors or find a new doctor, because of the headache and the hassle that it creates to like, oh, well, do you have your medical records, or do you have to fill out these forms again, or do you have to, I think I wish there was a portal where all of your medical records could just be stored and you could just like pull them up whenever you need them.
Ah,
And you could like read them yourselves and like understand what everything meant, because I think that's like the biggest disconnect, especially with like women's healthcare, is we don't have access to our own medical records or know what's going on with our bodies. And like, that's the most important thing. And that was really the catalyst of this business of like, we should be taking our health into our own hands, at least from like a baseline standpoint, so we can understand if there is something going on, because no one's going to be as big of an advocate for you as yourself.
absolutely.
And if you feel like you are in your early 30s, or you're noticing like your period is getting heavier, or it's getting lighter, or there's something going on, like, you should be looking into that. And like, if you do want to go to your doctor and talk about it, I would highly recommend that. But also, if you're just curious and you want to do it at home, or you don't have insurance or whatever it may be, like, there's nothing more important in our lives than our health. And so like, get tested, ask your doctor, get it at home kit, whatever it is, and like, just check in on yourself. I think that's what we wanted to be able to provide, because again, like, I wish I had just like known what all these terms meant and like been able to check on my levels when I was like 25, and then when I was 30. And I was mad at myself for waiting for so long.
But you just don't know what you don't know. And I think
You
that's
just
the biggest thing. And so
like,
I love that now you started Novalynn, and it's going to help so many women and couples, I feel like, out there, because they'll be able to have answers earlier on than having to wait to see a specialist or, wait that year of trying, or they can just know things right up front. Like if you're in your 20s, a college student, I know Kat and I have talked about it before of, even if you're in college and you want to get your AMH checked and just see, and like if it's low, like you can freeze your eggs. And like even if you don't have a partner yet, you could just freeze them to have that like lifeline for down the road if you're ready.
And I think too, it relieves so much stress off of people. Like, especially now that I've been talking to so many people about this, they're like, oh my gosh, like, should I freeze my eggs? Should I not? And I'm like, yes, freeze your eggs.
Yep.
Because, they're like, well, I don't even have a boyfriend yet. I'm like,
exactly. There you go.
good. Yes, freeze your eggs. Or they're like, I don't know if I want kids, or I don't know about this. I'm like, you might change your mind. And the number one thing that we can do for ourselves is give ourselves like borrowed time almost, right? And like taking our health into our own hands. And I'm so grateful for science because it allows us to do that. Absolutely. And so, these tests, I think, test yourself in college, test yourself when you're in your early 20s, test yourself when you're in your early 30s. And then, if it gets a little bit low, I would say freeze your eggs because it's like, it's like you don't want to go through what so many people have gone through before you. Like, if you can prevent it, like, knowing what I went through, I'm like, gosh, if someone could go and freeze their eggs at like 28 and get, 20 eggs, as opposed to waiting until they're 35 and getting like, you're going to have to do more retrievals at that point if this isn't going to work out for you. And some people, I don't want this to be like a scary thing. Like some people can go, and I had a friend recently, she's 42. She welcomed a son at 41. They tried for a year when she was 40, and they were able to get pregnant. So I do know everyone's story is different. Even like my aunt struggled with infertility for so long and ended up adopting 2 children. And then when she was 40, ended up getting pregnant naturally.
Wow.
So I know, there's always hope. And I think that that's like the thing that we can all like hold on to is like, there is always some sort of hope. And that's, the only thing that really gets me through and hopefully can get other people through is like, there's a little bit of just like, even if it's just a glimmer of hope or sunshine, like that's what we need to like keep going through our journeys.
No, I love that. It's so true. But also like, we do have science on our side. And so if we can get answers earlier on, I feel like that's just such a positive thing. And it does give us hope both ways of, there may get pregnant naturally. You may not have any issues with fertility, which obviously we wish for everyone. We don't want anyone to walk through this journey. We've been through it. We don't wish this upon anyone because it's the hardest thing ever. But if you could get a kickstart to it and get things tested earlier, like for sure do it. So like totally recommend it.
Yeah, because the doctors, like you said, they make you wait a year of trying, or they're not even testing everything that they should be. Like PCOS is such a prevalent thing, and you can have PCOS very early on and never be tested for it and just think that like your heavy periods are normal, right? Because doctors so often are like, oh no, that's normal. Like, this is just your cycle. This is just how you are. Or you cannot be getting any periods. And they're like, oh no, that's fine. Like they just, for some reason, are like so not quick to start testing for all these things until it's been a certain amount of time.
Which is super frustrating for the person.
It is. Yeah. Even like people with like endometriosis, they don't even know that they have it for so long because they just think, painful periods are
the way it is, how they do it.
They've always had it. Yeah. And so I just think if you can test yourself, and then you can take those results too and go to your doctor and be like, hey, my AMH is really, really low. Could we start talking about freezing my eggs?
Well, I'm sure it's super empowering too, just as a woman, just to know. I mean, because I didn't know half the things about my body. And I feel like that's we should know, it's my body. Like we should know what's going on, the ins and outs of our own like body. And as a
Mhm.
woman, to just be empowered and be able to have that confidence of knowing, you know, the results already before you even go to the doctor, I feel like it's just
That's
super.
how, yes. And that's, if we can educate ourselves more, I think that's the biggest thing. We just need to all educate ourselves and um not go down these rabbit holes on Reddit once it's once you're, because
Google.
that's like, or Dr. Google, like that is really where I started thinking like, okay, I need to get my information from the internet because nobody's talking about it. Like my doctor never explained like, oh yeah, 6 eggs is probably not ideal to
Mhm.
work with. And it wasn't even until like I started going down these rabbit holes of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to have to do a couple more
Right.
rounds. Like, I just was so naive at first and being like, oh, okay, we got 6 eggs, great. And then you start realizing, oh, if the sky is getting a little bit darker,
Mhm.
the more I'm reading, but the doctors don't tell you. They're sometimes I think, you just feel like another number in a factory, right? You just feel like, oh, this is like another day in the neighborhood for them. And they're not fully invested in your journey
Mhm.
at all. If anything, it's like the more, unfortunately, it's like a financial thing for them. They're like, okay, great. We're going to bill the insurance or we're going they're not thinking about it like that at all. But for us, we're like, okay, how much is this going to cost? And like another round of medicine, it's like thousands of dollars. And you want as many chances as possible for things to work like that first time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's your entire life. This is their job and this is literally your entire life, your future, your family. So it's just, I mean, it's just different, obviously, because you're so
Yeah.
invested in it.
Yeah. And so again, it's like test yourself as early as possible because you don't want it to be a stressful thing and like a thing where you're constantly having to do rounds and rounds and rounds and hopefully nobody
Yeah.
has to do that.
And
But
hopefully not a shock. So like if you have this, you know, then I mean, I'm sure at first, if it is low or whatever, it's going to be a shock, but you're not then shocked later on. And you can then take it and like learn all about it, like talk to your doctors early, just gain all the knowledge. And so then you can best approach it and be like, okay, now this is what I'm planning to do, even for the future. If you don't have a boyfriend or you don't have a partner, whatever it may be, then you just kind of have a game plan from the start versus years down the line being shocked with it and being like, oh my goodness, what do I do now?
exactly. And even if you aren't sure that you want children, like you should still be understanding your fertility. Like you should
Absolutely.
still be understanding what's going on with your body and you should feel empowered by the knowledge that you can get that is out there.
Well, I love that. Okay, so Novalynn Fertility is what it's called. And how can people access it? What kind of I know we talked a little bit about some of the tests that you offer, but can you just tell us a little bit about different kits that you have? You said they're at-home kits. Can you just share that?
So if you go to novalynfertility.com, you can look at all of our different test kits and we work with like a best in class lab. And actually, so our the blood card technology that we use is the same blood card technology that was used for modern fertility.
Oh,
But
cool.
we took it and like we advanced our tests. So we have a comprehensive women's fertility at home test kit. We have one that's just for your AMH and vitamin D, which is not offered anywhere else because of my own story, right? Of my own, like my AMH was going up because my vitamin D was going up so much. And at first, maybe it appeared lower because I had such a vitamin D deficiency. So I think people need to understand. And there's actually a Q&A that we did with the doctor on there that explains how your vitamin D can affect your AMH levels. So we have that kit. We have a PCOS kit. We have an anemia kit, diabetes, a thyroid panel, essential vitamin panel, just like a general woman's health, which tests for your DHEA, your estrogen, and your cortisol levels, because cortisol, I think people should also be really informed about, which is a stress hormone and how your stress hormones can actually affect your fertility.
Wow.
It's like all these different things. And then we also have an STD kit that you could do at home. I think some people are either embarrassed for some reason to go and like ask for an STD kit, but like those can really affect your fertility, like whether it's chlamydia, gonorrhea, trick, HSV, like all of those things left untreated can affect your fertility. So like test yourself
Yeah.
is
No,
like the
that's
number one thing. And so the way that it works is like you'll get our kit. It's a finger prick as opposed to like if you do go to Quest, they're taking like vials and vials of blood. So for this, we give you these little lancets, and you just poke your finger, you put it on the card, you mail it back in, and then you have a portal through our website where you'll get your results in a couple of days, and they'll be uploaded to the portal. It's all HIPAA compliant. And when you log in, you'll see like, okay, here's my, urine test results, my blood test results. So it's all organized there for you. And then, you can print out your results if you want to and take it to your doctor, or you can just look at your levels and be like, okay, I'm good. Or, okay, I want to go and potentially freeze my eggs if they're a little bit low, or if you realize like your thyroid is off, or if you realize maybe you do the PCOS test and you're like, okay, this explains a lot of what's going on to me, I should go talk to my doctor about this. You can do all of that. So all of our labs are CLIA certified, meaning that they meet the highest level of testing. So the labs are good, speedy results, everything, again, HIPAA compliant, so safe and secure. And I would just encourage people to test yourselves, whether it's our tests or other tests, whatever it is. I just think test yourself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Katie. No, I appreciate that so much. And I think our listeners really are going to appreciate it and definitely check it out. I feel like, especially because it is affordable, right? So I think it's huge when you're already going through on this end. If you're going through fertility, it's so expensive. There's so much to pay for. And just to have something that's more affordable too and gives you so much answers, I think is so amazing.
Our AMH and vitamin D test is $129. And if you did go to like a Quest lab out of pocket, it's much more expensive, and people can even Google that and see how much more expensive it is. And our cost for that is also lower than like other competitors out there. And again, ours is the only test that you could do your AMH and your vitamin D together, which is like so important to do, because at least for me, like my vitamin D like really did affect things and gave me like a false hope. So yeah, test yourself. Like that is the number one thing I would just continue, like the messaging is test yourself. Not to sound like a broken record.
No, it's so important. And we so appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey with us, and so excited for you that baby girl is here and that, your journey did end with a very happy ending. So we're so excited for you. And not only, of course, you got your baby girl, but it led to just a really cool and empowering business adventure. So that's awesome. And I know you're going to help so many people out there.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. And if you guys are listening, go to novalynnfertility.com, and you guys can even just read, the blogs that we have with doctors on there. And then we share our story a bit on there as well. And hopefully this can just be a community for people to continue to be able to educate themselves is like the number one thing. Like we all need to just educate ourselves and then share, right?
Absolutely.
That's been that was the most helpful for me, was just hearing other people's stories. So
well,
yeah,
we love
I
it.
appreciate you. Like you are just
Yeah.
wonderful, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And we will link your Instagram as well as the website, so everyone will be able to access it there. But again, thank you, Katie, for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.